In today's episode of Quick Chat, I speak to Ariana, head of marketing at Zeal, who shares her journey into marketing, highlighting the intersection of psychology and marketing. She discusses her experiences at both Zoom and now Zeal, emphasizing the importance of creativity and resourcefulness in marketing strategies. The conversation delves into the significance of brand strategy, the effectiveness of cold email marketing, and the process of refining the ideal customer profile. Ariana also shares insights on successful campaigns and the future of marketing, particularly with the rise of AI tools. If you found this episode interesting, please leave a like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hey Ariana, appreciate you taking the time to be here. I'd love to know from your side almost what initially sparked your interest in marketing and how did you find yourself in this career?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in college, I started off as a psychology major, and
Okay.
that's still a really big interest of mine. So that makes sense. And then I
Mhm.
transferred to become a business major, which was pretty broad. But
Sure.
within those courses, I discovered marketing,
Mhm.
and which I love marketing because it's a profession for people who enjoy both strategic and creative thinking.
Definitely.
And it was a great blend of what I loved about psychology and business. It requires sort of a fundamental understanding of people, what motivates them, why they buy or don't buy. And I think maybe some people have kind of a cynical view of what we do in marketing and sales because
Sure.
they see it as a way to push things on people that they don't
Mhm.
necessarily need or want. And that
Mhm.
definitely does happen. But I think it's important that I think it's important as a marketer to really only represent products and services that you believe in and that you feel proud to stand behind.
Sure, absolutely. And that's something that I've always found interesting is sort of the intersection of psychology and marketing. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to almost walk me through kind of what you learned from the psychology days that is kind of used now in your work as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I suppose I didn't get very far into the major, but
Sure.
I think there's a lot of principles that apply in terms of what motivates people and what are sort of some of the universal human needs.
Mm.
What are some of our common fears? And I think so that sort of thing like loss aversion is a
Sure.
big
Yeah.
one, right? So how we are disproportionately motivated by the loss of something rather than the potential gain of something, whether it's losing $100 or gaining $100,
Absolutely.
the fear of loss is substantially more impactful.
hmm Definitely. No, I really appreciate that. It's definitely something that's interesting as well. I'd love it if you could almost walk me through kind of your journey to getting to where you are now at Zeal as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So after college, I began a journey in digital marketing specifically,
hmm
and that had a lot to do with website management and SEO, and then later on paid digital campaigns as well.
hmm
After college, I began consulting and doing freelance work in terms of website work, and then I landed my first, couple of jobs in marketing, and that has been my role has been growing and expanding. And then most recently, I worked at Zoom,
hmm
and I began there very early on, well before it was an established brand, and we were sort
Sure.
of a small team, 8 marketers. And at the time, we were the underdog, against much larger kind of
Yeah.
legacy companies. And it was a very exciting time to be joining that startup. And I realized that I really was very interested in tech as an industry,
hmm
and then my work began to expand beyond digital marketing as well. So now I am the leader of marketing at Zeal, and I'm taking a lot of what I learned at Zoom and applying those learnings and lessons to what we're doing here.
Absolutely. And obviously you mentioned that at the time that you were at Zoom, it was a much smaller team and you kind of got to experience the brand growing as well. I'd love to know what it's like being moving from a vendor like Zoom now to Zeal as well and what you managed to transfer from the things that you learned at Zoom.
Yeah, it has been awesome. In many ways, the environment here at Zeal really resembles the early days that I loved at Zoom.
Mhm.
Before Zoom was a verb and a
Yeah.
household name. Um, and one of the key differences is, with a smaller budget, you do have to be creative and resourceful, but also with a smaller budget, there are less expectations as well. So it actually gives you the freedom to try things. And at Zoom, I learned that it is possible to become a victim of your own success in a way,
Right.
which I think is a really interesting concept because it means that like when you find something that works, you can never stop doing that
Sure.
thing because it's baked into every future forecast.
Mhm.
And if you achieved a new benchmark of success, um,
Go back.
you can
Yeah.
never fall below that. So that kind
Sure.
of paints you into a corner in a way. It kind of limits your ability to
Hmm.
experiment with things. So that's what I love about working at a scale up is that you really have the freedom to try things and experiment with things. Because even when something works, you never know if it might work better if you tried
Sure.
it a different way. And yeah, so at Zeal, we're free to try things. We're shaking up a traditional industry, and we're being rewarded with market growth.
Amazing. I'd love to almost understand a bit more about what Zeal do. What are the kinds of challenges that you solve as well?
Sure. So, kind of in a nutshell, Zeal is a B2B contract lifecycle management tool or a
Hmm.
CLM.
Hmm.
It helps companies to automate their entire contract lifecycle from end to end. And every contract that you create on the platform, whether you import it as a PDF or you create it from scratch with our Word editor, that contract is converted into a smart contract, which means that it is autonomously and continuously monitoring itself for keywords, clauses, any rules that you set, which that creates an unprecedented amount of visibility into your contract repository and also enhancing your legal compliance.
Something that you mentioned as well was about how you're shaking up sort of an industry where there's a lot of legacy players. I'd love to know almost how you differentiate yourself and what strategies you're using to kind of bypass these entrenched competitors.
Yeah, that's absolutely baked into our DNA at Zeal, and we like to think of ourselves as a V2
Sure.
CLM. Whereas, some of the larger companies have been around quite a bit longer, and we consider them to be kind of legacy players. And some of the
Hmm.
key distinctions are, not only the features that we offer, so sort of the shift from um, local Microsoft Word based editing to browser based, as well as some of the integrations that we offer. So, one part of it is features, but another part of it is really our brand, our
Hmm.
messaging and positioning. Um, one of the one of the hallmarks of our brand, the reason that we call this company Zeal is because when two companies are doing business together in the very beginning, there's all this optimism about the
Sure.
partnership. But then once you start to actually put pen to paper and you start to dictate the legal terms of that relationship, then it all kind of, falls apart. Now
Sure.
suddenly it's a zero sum game. It's very adversarial, and some of our larger competitors are very. Their tone is very serious, and it's very much to the traditional customer profile of the general counsel, who's just really focused on risk aversion,
Sure.
on avoiding risk.
Yeah.
But Zeal is more focused on the optimism of the partnership. We're fun, we are playful. We
Hmm.
we we feel that contracting with other companies should be something enjoyable, which is I
Sure.
think something that companies haven't really set out to do. I don't think enjoyable or fun would ever be part of the language of contracting in a traditional sense.
Absolutely. And I guess it's really interesting you mentioned that brand piece as well. And I'd love to know almost what goes into developing a brand strategy and almost how you balance that with more shorter term lead gen efforts as well.
Mm. Yeah, that is an important question because you do have to balance long
Hmm.
and short-term goals. And I think part of what goes into developing those long-term branding and awareness strategies is internal advocacy and education. So that involves really helping everyone internally to understand why we're investing in brand awareness and
Hmm.
long-term, brand reputation strategies, um, and also making sure that you have clear KPIs that
Sure.
go along with those long-term nebulous goals of brand building.
Yeah.
That's really important as well. And I'd say also just thinking about the different strengths of the team members and making sure that everyone is dedicated to either short or long term goals or dedicated to a specific part of the marketing funnel so that
Hmm.
we're not stretched too thin. We're not trying to
Sure.
do, not, not everyone is trying to do everything at the same time.
I'd love to know almost from a tactical perspective, you mentioned getting other stakeholders internally on board with sort of a long-term brand building piece. How does that look in a tactical sense for yourself?
Yeah, I think that involves communication, that involves really clear goal setting and making sure that that these very abstract kinds of goals are paired with, let's say that we're talking about SEO, right?
Hmm.
SEO is important to every company, but for the most part, not everyone understands what's involved or what we're trying to achieve. But there are very clear and specific KPIs associated with long-term SEO
Sure.
performance, right? So if we are talking about, we're going to be investing in content writers and we're going to be investing in um, backlink strategies. What are the goals that we're trying to achieve with that specifically in terms of domain authority, in terms of number of backlinks, web traffic, and that web traffic should translate into how many leads, how many
Mhm.
sales, depending on our conversion rate. So I think it's that kind of thing, breaking down a big abstract goal of long-term brand building and really distilling it into practical and specific goals and metrics that we can achieve.
Absolutely. And I guess from that, I'd love to almost know what are the kind of key marketing channels that have had more success for Zeal as well.
Yeah, I would say cold email strategy continues to have a high ROI for us,
Okay.
even though, it has become massively saturated
Yeah,
with,
that's really
uh,
surprising to hear.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's AI tools,
Hmm.
there are agencies that do this for you now. There are so many email tools and providers, but yeah, it continues to be a high ROI channel for us. Have you heard or received a lot of feedback from other marketers that it's kind of just not the same as before,
To
or
be, to be honest with you, no one that I've asked has said email marketing as their best performing channel. So I'd really
yeah?
love to unpack that a bit and understand how it's given you so much ROI. Do you think it's because of the copy that goes into it, or because of the nature of the people that you're trying to sell into?
Yeah, I think copy is really important. I think, with any successful campaign, you really want to be able to make it data driven and very targeted. So
Hmm.
I think part of what makes it successful for us is that we have a very well defined ICP
Okay.
and target list, and
Mhm.
we have a really clear value proposition to that audience. And if we can get in front of them and make ourselves known to them, if we can get them in a room to book a demo, um, the value proposition is very clear and the probability to close is good as well. And I think to your point about the varying success of email, I think that this could also vary quite a bit depending whether it's B2B or B2C,
Yeah,
and what is the complexity of the buying cycle for your
sure.
particular product. If you have a highly bespoke kind of implementation or product, then it really does make sense to go through this, email
Hmm.
demo sales motion. But
Sure.
for other products and services, I could see other kinds of channels being more effective. It's if it's just a very transactional, off the shelf kind of product.
And for you, typically with the cold emails, is the call to action like book a demo, or is it sort of here, watch this webinar or read this white paper? What?
We do a series of them, ranging from the least effort, to the
Okay.
most, right? We don't ask necessarily for a demo up front, but it's sort of
Cool.
like a long-term nurturing, relationship building and
Okay.
trust building campaign. So, it's here are free resources. Here's a recorded webinar.
Hmm.
You can sign yourself up for a free account. And if you have any questions, we're always here. You can talk to us and schedule a call if you have more questions. So it's sort of a build up or a lead up, in terms of like working our way up to, asking for the person's time.
That's that's really interesting. And that's definitely why you're getting a lot of ROI from that. Because from what I'm seeing in the space and from people that I've spoken to, and also my experience coming from a sales background, when you're
Mm,
sending out cold emails and it's the call to action is give me 30 minutes of your time. You don't know
yeah,
who I am, you don't know what we're doing, you've not
right.
given anything, so how can you ask to get? But it makes
Exactly.
sense when you're pushing and you're giving value, then it makes sense why you're getting such an ROI. That's really interesting. And I think something you mentioned there as well is you have a very refined ICP too. You have a sort of target list of accounts as well. I'd love to get into almost what went behind refining that list and how are you continuously refining your ICP?
Ideal customer profile is senior in-house legal teams
Hmm.
and in various key industries like staffing and nonprofit.
Sure.
And actually, we find that many companies are still managing their contracts manually. They use
Okay.
spreadsheets, they use things like SharePoint, which is not built for that purpose. And
Yeah.
a lot of them really have no idea what's actually inside their contracts, which is a
Right.
pretty risky position to be in. So we discovered over time that, the senior legal counsel in-house is the primary buyer and
Hmm.
is the end user, but we also found that there's a whole buying team
Yeah.
involved, right? There sometimes that involves operations, procurement, finance, even sales.
Yeah.
And because contracts touch every, aspect of a business, and there are different value propositions for each of those functions within a company as well. So,
Hmm.
yeah, we've refined that over time by having many conversations with customers, and during our demos, seeing who gets invited to the buying table and what their questions are, what their concerns are, and that informs our messaging as well and how
Right.
we're positioning it to those various buying roles.
So it's basically when you're able to speak to customers and almost relay their buying process, you then adapt your messaging to that. Okay. So that I
Definitely.
guess needs quite close alignment with sales in your organization to be able to do something like that. How
Right.
are you almost aligning with sales and maybe even the product team as well?
Yeah, we try and bake that into our process. So we'll do things like make it part of our demo process to ask, how did you hear about us, and
Hmm.
what are the pain points, what is bringing you here today, and kind of
Hmm.
relaying that information back to marketing. Sometimes we'll do that in an automated way when we collect information. So just trying to find ways to bake it into the process, and then also to have those ongoing discussions with the other internal departments about refining our messaging and
Sure.
positioning.
Amazing. And obviously, through your time at Zeal and probably in the past, you've obviously done quite a lot of campaigns as well. I'd love to almost know if you can share one that stands out as particularly successful and almost explain why it went so well.
Yeah. I have been involved in a lot of paid and unpaid campaigns, a lot of top of funnel organic
Hmm.
campaigns as well. But my favorite campaign success stories often have to do with creative and resourceful approaches to leveraging your own product for
Okay.
growth. So, as you know, vendors are very quick to sell us ad campaigns to reach new audiences, but I
Sure.
always like to think about what we ways that we can do more with the bottom of the funnel.
Hmm.
How can we either upsell existing customers? How can we incentivize our customers to invite or refer friends to the platform?
Sure.
What can we do with in-product marketing?
Hmm.
Because in-product marketing is relatively inexpensive, it's easy to track and attribute, and you set it up one time and it produces leads forever.
Yeah.
So this was done very successfully at Slack early
Hmm.
on in their early stage of hypergrowth, and we managed to reproduce that at Zoom with a campaign where we added a step to our user onboarding that suggested inviting a friend to Zoom. And this wasn't
Hmm.
something that a user had to do in order to create a meeting, but it makes it easier, and it really this campaign really leverages the collaborative and the networking aspects of the platform, right?
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
people have meetings with other people. People
Yeah.
sign contracts with other people, and they negotiate and collaborate on contracts with other people. So we introduced this step into the onboarding flow, and we saw an immediate impact. Thousands of invitations being sent every week, new users coming onto the platform. So it had a big effect, and it costs us nothing but the dev time, and that's my favorite kind of campaign.
Wow. That's really interesting. So it's almost capturing and using your existing customer base to help you expand. That's
Right.
wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I'd
like
love.
growth hacking.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I'd love to almost as a final question to understand almost how your marketing strategy is evolving over the next few years and whether there's any sort of technologies or trends as well that you're really keeping a close eye on.
Let's see. So we do have some aggressive revenue and hiring targets this year.
Hmm.
So I think that next year is going to look, drastically different in terms of marketing spend and size. I see our team growing and going deeper into their individual
Hmm.
functions. And I see opportunities to experiment with new partnerships
Okay.
and with new campaigns. We'll take what we've learned and what's worked for us, and then we'll scale it up, even bigger. And yeah, I think we talked a little bit about tools and the growth, the explosion of new AI tools, and it seems like there are so many options now. And I'm really interested to see where this trend goes with the use of AI
Hmm.
in marketing tools, and to see what that landscape looks like in the next year or two. I think it should be very interesting.
Absolutely. I think I'd love to ask you almost a follow-up question just on that. You mentioned that you're doing a big push for marketing and hiring, and you've got some aggressive revenue targets coming in. So are you kind of putting in place a strategy now for next year, or has that strategy been put in place?
We are developing our strategy for next year, and that what we have in place is those goals and those benchmarks that
Hmm.
we need to hit, and provided that we hit all of our goals, then we anticipate growing our team significantly, and then also growing our investment in third party partnerships and
Hmm.
ad campaigns. So yeah, it's something that we're planning for now.
I'd love to know almost then what kind of tactical steps you take when you're making a decision, especially if you haven't got data to back it up.
So when we having historical data is really helpful, but in the absence of historical data, definitely looking at any industry benchmarks that we can gather,
Hmm.
and also kind of working backwards from the end goal. So if the end goal, is a sales or an overall revenue target of X, then
Sure.
we know that we what we have are conversion rates at each step of
Hmm.
the funnel, and we can work back from that target to say, okay, we need to do this much outreach from our at our level in order to
Yeah.
see the kinds of
Result.
results that we're hoping to achieve.
Amazing. Really appreciate your time, Ariane. It was a really interesting
Yeah.
discussion. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.